And now it's time for a fairly rare Coronation Street video. Rare just because these days a lot of my attention is elsewhere, usually with Hollyoaks, but it's an interesting topic that I thought I'd just kind of spitball with and see just where I stood with things. Where at this point in time, as it's a question, so for the last period of time, the Rovers has been owned by Jenny Connor, or at least owned, operated, landladied by. She has been the front and centre of the Rovers for what feels to be a very sizable time now, since the Connors originally owned the Rovers. But since Daisy left, it felt like Jenny's stage up front of the bar had kind of ran its course, and I don't really think it's necessarily a bad idea. I think she was a good owner of the bar, but at the end of the day, it feels like the Rovers has quite a lot of the stuff in Coronation Street. It's kind of been undernourished. It's kind of been underappreciated, if you will. Now, why do I say that? Well, the only reason it was front and center so much is simply because Daisy was a very focal character and was a big point of the writers. But when you don't have Daisy there and you have Jenny, now it's just generally in flux. And obviously the best owners of the Rovers are typically a family. It's a family who owns it and runs it, and they are a fairly sizable part of our screens, like Jack and Vera, like Bet and Alec, I'm trying to think, like Steve, like the McDonalds. You know, you want a big focal family who a lot of the drama will be focused on, but you also get a good excuse to have some of the younger cast, Tina in the past, like Leanne, Maria. You have these characters who will serve pints in the pub and just do the normal exposition that you have when you go into the Rovers. But it's a general problem though, right? Because ever since the pandemic time, it felt like the Rovers was never actually full. And I know it's just an extras thing, and it's kind of like a cost-cutting thing, and especially present with ITV's, pretty well documented soap problems at this point. That it just kind of, it doesn't land in a sense, because now it's been empty, but it's not part of the storylines. We're just expected to believe that they are somehow funding it whilst not even having that many customers. And it's a less fun thing, because, and it's a thing of soaps and shows, right, where obviously back in the day, they would just get the cast to just sit in there and they all just have a drink and they all just kind of, even smoke sometimes, but you just sit around and you don't spill anything. You just drink your pint and then you just let all the scenes happen around you. But obviously at this point in time, you're not really getting that, because first, the pub's never full, and second, it's only really full of 2 to 3 people in a booth, for example. It's kind of to most, and in soaps it is typically the heart of the show, but if the heart of the show is not really pumping blood, you really start to question what's necessarily went wrong. And at this point, it feels like the police set gets more use than the Rovers, which is kind of blasphemy to suggest, but it's just kind of been in a weird state of limbo, because they haven't wanted to install a new family in there. And even when they did have the Connors and Jenny and Daisy, they didn't really want to, well, obviously Daisy's a Midgley, but they just didn't really want to establish more family members in there. Because obviously when Jenny had it with the Connors, that made a lot more sense, because, Johnny landlord, Jenny landlady, you have Kate behind the bar, and honestly, I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank as to who else would actually be on the bar. You have all these characters, and it feels like a proper family thing. And Michelle, there we are, Michelle behind the bar as always. When you have the McDonald's, you have Steve, you have Bev. I think I've seen Beverly Cavard. You have Liz. And it just kind of, it lacks that general kind of oomph, and it lacks that gravitas that you kind of want for the Rovers. It doesn't really feel like it's that important anymore. And I kind of joke that obviously their hospital and police sets have gotten a whole lot more love than the Rovers for a while. It's just kind of insane that it's not front and center. And I think that is just down to having Jenny at the helm, because Jenny is a good character. I think she is important to have on the show, and Coronation Street loves to honour characters who have stayed there for a long period of time, and I think she does fit in, but I don't think she should be at the heart of the show anymore. If anything, she's kind of been inflated by having such a key role in the show, and that's why we're posed this question: who is going to buy the Rovers? Because Carla's had it up for sale for ages. She's not installing herself in the pub. She has no reason to want to run it herself. She's not going to move her, Betsy, and Lisa in. There's no point. But I will also say, who would actually buy it? And I think that's fairly interesting because, you know, we do currently have Glinda, who is in charge right now, but I don't necessarily see the point in Glenda. I definitely think she can be an interesting character, but I definitely don't want her as the focal point behind the bar. And I think judging all this, I think that the people to put behind the bar, a part of me would love to see the Platts behind the bar, just because of how weird it would run, but the Platts are really, they're not really the type to pay for it. Who would pay for it? Who would actually run it? You could have David it would be weird, but you could have David, you could have Shona, you could have Sarah, you could even have Kit, you could have Bethany, all running the Rovers. I think that would be a kind of a cool fit. I don't really know who you'd have as landlady. I think you would give it honorarily to Audrey, but they don't like to give her many scenes in the year. So I don't know what you'd do there. Obviously, the Grimshaws are kind of dead on their feet as such. You do not give it to the Winterbrowns. Absolutely not. You don't really give it to the Alahans either. It's not really a good idea. There's no point in giving it to the Barlows at this point because, once again, they don't really have the wealth or the money. You wouldn't install Fizz and Tyrone in there because it just simply wouldn't necessarily work. So I do think that whoever has to be in the bar kind of has to be a not newer character, just a different character. I don't think any of the suitors we necessarily have are going to be that important. I think that Glenda and Lauren will stick around. I do think that they will both be barmaids in future, and I think that will be fairly important to keep because the Rovers are really good at giving like a younger actress or a younger actor a lot of lines and good chat with a lot of different people and good scenes, and it means you get to really test the metal, test the comedy, test how they actually function. But I think generally, what you do now, and I don't necessarily know how you do it or why, but judging who has been announced to return, I generally think the answer is to install Eva in the bar when she returns. Because Eva should be a character who should be elevated in this new time on the show. In this new stint of the show, she's an older Eva, she's got an older daughter, and obviously her roots with Stella as their mum. And she'll probably install Leanne in the bar as well, which I don't necessarily want at all because I still absolutely hate Leanne and think she is I think she's a horrific character with very little intrigue going for her. But she is a big part of the Coronation Street plans. I think they install Leanne as landlady of the Rovers. I think that they have Leanne work there. I think Glenda works there. I think maybe Toya if they mend bridges. I don't really remember what Eva and Toya's relationship was. And perhaps Eva returns with a new man or, settles down with someone there. You could go for a kind of weird little... this one's a bold one, but I'm all about stupid theories that wouldn't really work. You could put the Baileys front and center, but also I don't necessarily think that works. I think that works better than a lot of the other options. Because I would like a Barlow's in the Rovers, and I keep wanting to say the Vic. I keep wanting the Barlow's there, but also you need like some younger faces, right? You need some of the younger cast to actually establish themselves there. So yeah, I think Eva to run the bar. Hopefully she comes in with, something of a family, a reminder of Aiden, but also it's not like there's really much people to react to her returning as such. Like, does she get with Adam? Do they tease Adam and Alia splitting up? They seem quite content with Adam and Alia. Are they necessarily trying to do this? I don't necessarily know. And I will say, I do think that I would love to see what people think about I would love to see what people think about with who they would want to run the Rovers. It just feels like we're not really set for options, right? Because if Jenny and Daisy aren't having it, do the Barlows install themselves? I don't think so. Do the Platts do it? I don't think so. So really, I think Eva coming in to run it is the best shout. But in the same way, you do need to fully build and invest around Eva in order to actually become a landlady and actually become a big proud and open owner. So I think there's definitely the potential there, and I think that's the best option in my opinion. Maybe Eva and Ryan, perhaps. I think that may work. I think that might actually work. I don't know if they've ever interacted before, but I think Ryan was always a bit too young in comparison to Eva, when he was there. But I don't know. But then again, I pose a question to you. Who do you think should run the Rovers once they inevitably sell it? Tell me in the comment section down below. I've been Ash from Watching Walford. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.